Welcome back to the news at 10. Let's cross over to Abuja now. Here's Ibrahim Adra. Ibrahim.
Hello, Ejoman. Hello, everyone. Now, the Islamic movement in Nigeria is alleging that the police have killed 15 of its members during their annual Ashura procession across the country. The group members had defied the police warning against embarking on the procession. And those in Kaduna State particularly came out in their numbers to mark the day around Bakinwa area and the western bypass of the state capital. IMAN spokesman Ibrahim Musa claims that 3 of their members were killed and policemen allegedly opened fire on them during a peaceful procession along the Nnamdi Azikiwe western bypass. But the police have denied the allegation through its spokesman, DSP Yakubu Sabo, who told our correspondent that there is no report of any attack or killing of any members of the IMN. He says the claim that 3 people were killed is just an attempt to draw public sympathy. Now to Ekiti State, where some students of the Federal University of Ekiti today attacked the convoy of the wife of the Ekiti State Governor, Bisi Fayemi, on her return from a tour of some local government areas in the state. The students allegedly barricaded the Oye-Ikole-Abuja highway to prevent the convoy from passing with a view to vent their anger over poor power supply in the town. Attempt by security men to disperse them with tear gas and gunshots did not immediately yield result as they continued their onslaught. The students were said to have engaged the security operatives detailed with the governor's wife in a violent clash with some vehicles on the convoy, including that of the security operatives, burned and 2 pump rifles seized. Mrs. Fayemi was said to have been whisked away amidst tight security while everyone scampered for safety. While exiting the venue, the students still launched another attack on the vehicles in the convoy, with the one conveying journalist being one of the worst hit. The Bank of Industry is pledging to reach over 1 million people with soft loans as part of economic rebuilding plan of the Northeast region. The managing director of the bank, Mr. Olukayode Ekpito, explains that the loan will be at 0 interest rate and that the bank is upscaling its intervention in the region. He was speaking at the second Nexus conference in Abuja.
It's the second edition of the Nigeria Nexus Summit, and partners within the Emergency Coordination Center are deliberating on efforts to invest in people and communities affected by conflicts.
Investment and entrepreneurship.
The Bank of Industry, through the Northeast Rehabilitation Fund, is contributing to the economic rebuilding plan for the Northeast.
This fund is designed as a base for kickstarting local commerce by empowering and re-establishing persons affected by the conflict and helping them regain their means of livelihood. Our objective is to reduce the reliance of the indigenes on humanitarian aid. Besides, with a plan to empower 100,000 micro, small, and medium entrepreneurs. But today, we would like to take this number to over 1 million beneficiaries.
Over the last 4 years, the bank has spent about 627 billion naira to empower over 7,000 enterprises, thereby creating 2.7 million jobs. Partners at this event believe it's time to invest in real human development.
These people are very much able to go back or to go forward to productive activities. Most of them are displaced by war and violence, the ones we are dealing with. They were able to do a job before. They are able to do a job after. So how do we bridge and how do we leverage?
We all come together and find ways not just to give a hand out, but also to give a hand up, to provide actual solutions to the problems that Nigeria is facing today. And that requires financing, it requires investment, it requires investment in human beings, it requires investments in communities, it requires infrastructure.
Beyond providing aid and giving people food and some stipends, we need to help people to be able to help themselves. So we hope that with this conference today that there will be more investment in those conflict areas to enable the people actually acquire a sustainable means of livelihood.
The target in this conversation is to develop plans that will lead to investments for the building of resilient communities.
Now, for more reports from the world of business, we return to our Lagos studio where Kayode Okikelu is sitting on our business desk. Kayode.
You first. First Bank.
Well, thank you, Ibrahim, even though I'm standing. We'll begin with Nigeria's crude oil exports, which rose to 2.2 million barrels per day in August, and this is the highest this year, according to latest report from Bloomberg tanker tracking data. The latest survey indicates that rising sabotage of oil infrastructure has not significantly marred the country's crude production amid its exemption from the output cut by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The latest figure further indicates that the country's oil production last month is nearing its target of 2.3 million barrels per day, required for the 2019-2020 budget. And the acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is asking accountants across the country to play their part in fighting corruption by avoiding sharp practices as they carry out their duties. At the 49th Annual Accountants Conference hosted by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, the acting EFCC chairman and the secretary to the government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, stresses the roles accountants play in strengthening institutional frameworks, which they say is crucial in the fight against corruption.
It's a convergence of chartered accountants across Nigeria. For the next 5 days, they will be having sessions around the theme of the year, Building Nigeria for Sustainable Growth and Development. Established in 1965, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria has a mission to produce world-class chartered accountants, regulate, and continually enhance their ethical standards in the public interest. That public interest, according to speakers here, is being threatened by endemic corruption.
There is no act of financial investigation we have conducted where you don't find the accountant, whether a chartered accountant or non-chartered, conspiring with the leaders to loot away.
Representing President Muhammadu Buhari at the event is the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, who applauded ICANN for their contribution to the fight against corruption.
ICANN's Accountability Index is no doubt another of our great initiatives to support the government in our resolve to rid our country of the cankerworm of corruption.
The president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria speaks on the commitment of the institute in building Nigeria's economy.
As chartered accountants, we are at a vantage position as gatekeepers of our combined resources, and we should guarantee their efficient and effective use.
This year's conference provides a platform for chartered accountants to rethink developments in the profession and the roles they play in Nigeria's development process.
Let's now head over to the NSE, where the stock market sustains losses for a second consecutive session in the week amid continued intense sell pressure on listed bellwether equities. Well, let's get the details from Teniola Shoboali.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. More price load shared from listed high-value equities pushed the stock market's main index almost below the 27,000 level as investors extend sell pressure across 4 key sectors of the NSE today. The all-share index dropped further by 0.16%, while total equities value lost 20 billion naira as Nestle Nigeria suffered another round of profit-taking, bringing its share price almost below 1,000 per share. However, performance on the price chart recorded a positive margin of 18 gainers, led by 9.26% advance from UAC Properties against 12 losers, led by 9.52% from Thomas Wyatt. Overall volume of transactions for the day was higher by 73.72 million units at 364.21 million, largely driven for a second day by the shares of GT Bank. And that's the stock market report. I'm Teniola Shoboale.
Thank you, Teniola. Outside the country, stocks market in the United States and Tuesday's session positive across the board. And this is despite drop in tech shares and junk status downgrade of car maker Ford's credit rating by Moody's. Well, let's find out how other major markets ended the day. Thank you for watching Business News Tonight. I am Kayode Okikiolu. The news at 10 continues with Ijeoma.
You first. First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Coyote. U.S. President Donald Trump has fired his national security advisor, John Bolton, noting he strongly disagreed with many of his suggestions, as did others in the administration. According to the president on his Twitter handle, I informed John Bolton last night that his services are no longer needed at the White House. Here's Juliana Olayenka with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening from the Channel's newsroom in London. The British Prime Minister has held his first cabinet meeting after a night of drama in the Commons. Lawmakers launched a protest as Parliament was officially suspended for 5 weeks amid the Brexit crisis. Hours later, government ministers said little as they entered Downing Street for talks.
Are you running scared of Parliament, Brexit Secretary? You're frightened of Parliament? Is now the right time to shut Parliament down? Are you trying to silence MPs?
And Boris Johnson may have lost a vote for a snap election, but that didn't stop the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, from going into campaign mode as he addressed trade unions in Brighton.
No one can trust the word of the Prime Minister, who is threatening to break the law to force through no deal. So, a general election is coming. But we won't allow Johnson to dictate the terms, and I can tell you this. We're ready for that election. We're ready to unleash the biggest people-powered campaign we've ever seen in this country and in this movement. And in that election, we will commit to a public vote with a credible option to leave and the option to remain.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister was grilled by a group of primary school students in London.
Yes.
So are we going to leave Brexit?
Yes, October the 31st.
Are we leaving Brexit with a deal or no?
We're going to get a deal. Okay, we're going to get a deal. We're going to work very hard to get a deal. I think there are loads of people around the place who really want this thing done, and that includes the British people, but also in Brussels and our friends and partners across the EU. They want us to get on with this. It's been dragging on for 3 years, and I can see that the policy of the opposition and some opposition parties, Labour included, is delay, dither beyond October the 31st, but nobody can see what that achieves.
North Korea has fired 2 unidentified projectiles. The move came just hours after the country offered to restart nuclear talks with the United States. South Korea's military detected the launches, saying they were short-range projectiles which flew about 330 kilometres. Algeria's Prime Minister is reportedly preparing to resign. 2 senior sources say Noureddine Bedoui will stand down soon to make way for fresh elections this year. Demonstrators, who've been rallying since February, want all figures associated with the former president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, to be removed from office. Last week, the army chief said the Electoral Commission should call an election by September the 15th, a move that would trigger a 90-day countdown to the vote. Hundreds of African refugees trapped in Libyan detention centres will be evacuated to Rwanda within the next few weeks. The United Nations says the move is part of an urgent effort to relocate people as the situation in the country continues to deteriorate.
Under this agreement, the government of Rwanda will receive and provide protection to refugees and asylum seekers who are currently being held in detention centres in Libya.
The final crew member of a stricken cargo vessel has been rescued after a 35-hour ordeal. There were cheers as he emerged from the hull of the Golden Ray, which capsized off the US coast of Georgia on Sunday. Rescuers managed to extract 20 people from the ship after it became disabled, but a hole had to be drilled in the vessel to reach the remaining 4. Hong Kong police have denied claims people were killed during demonstrations at train stations. Protesters have been calling for an investigation, as well as the release of CCTV, following clashes on August the 31st. Meanwhile, leader Carrie Lam, who last week withdrew the controversial extradition bill that triggered the protests, has again appealed for calm.
The offer of 4 actions, not just the formal withdrawal of the bill, is not directly to stop these protests or the violence. It is really to extend my sincerity to start a dialogue with the people.
Jack Ma, the co-founder of e-commerce giant Alibaba, has retired at the age of 55. The charismatic entrepreneur, who according to Forbes is China's richest man with a net worth of more than $38 billion, launched the company 20 years ago. He now plans to focus on his philanthropic work, education and family. And finally, a British woman has set a new record, becoming the oldest person to sail around the world solo, non-stop and unassisted.
Welcome back! Thank you!
After spending more than 330 days alone at sea, 77-year-old Jean Socrates finally returned to her starting point in British Columbia, Canada. She says it was a tough voyage, with her yacht sustaining some damage, and she's now extremely happy to be back on solid ground. And that's your international news around the world in 5.
Thanks a lot, Juliana. That's one very strong lady. Still ahead on the news at 10, Nigeria qualifies for the 2019 CAF Under-23 African Cup of Nations in Egypt after defeating Sudan 5-0 in Asaba. That's on sports.